Hello iguanas, and welcome to our new class book. We've got a book here which has arrived in the post, and it's called The Uncommoners, The Crooked Sixpence, and it's written by someone called Jennifer Bell. Okay, I'm going to read you the blurb first. So what drew me to this book? Welcome to a world where nothing is quite as it seems. A silver bell will tell you the way, a candle's wick will hide you. A crooked sixpence will be the first warning. Time is running out. Ivy and Seb Sparrow stumble across something uncommon when they see a feather scratch an ominous letter on their grandma's kitchen wall. Soon they are lost in the extraordinary world of Londonore, where ordinary objects have amazing powers. But where there is power, evil often lurks. And Ivy and Seb must get to the bottom of the family secret before it's too late. The Crooked Sixpence. Ivy rocked forward as the ambulance turned the corner. Everything inside rattled. Okay then, the paramedic said, looking up from his clipboard. He was a bald man with faded tattoos all the way up his forearms. What's your full name? Ivy Elizabeth Sparrow, she fired off, tapping her yellow Wellingtons on the floor. It was so stuffy, she needed fresh air. She looked over the paramedic's shoulder and wondered if she could ask him to open one of the blacked-out windows. She could see her frizzy brown curls bobbing in the glass, even more out of control than usual. The paramedic made a note with his biro and turned towards the rear of the vehicle. What about you? At the other end of the bench, leaning forward, legs apart, sat a boy with a grey hoodie bearing the brand logo of The Ritz. His wiry blonde hair had fallen in front of his eyes, but Ivy knew that he was glaring at her. It's Seb, the boy replied dryly. I'm her brother. The paramedic smiled as he jotted down the name. Ivy tried to push Seb out of her mind. This was all his fault. She leaned over to the stretcher and took Grandma Sylvie's hand. It felt softer than usual. There were Velcro straps across Grandma's chest, a brace supporting her neck and a misted oxygen mask over her nose and mouth. Ivy had never seen her looking so fragile before. Well, how old are you both? The paramedic continued. 11, Ivy replied, shuffling even closer, slightly closer to Grandma Sylvie. I'm 16, Seb said in a deep voice. Ivy frowned and glanced sideways at him. He had only just turned 14 last month. Okay, good. The paramedic's face softened. Now, I understand that you're both very concerned at the moment, but trust me, the best thing you can do to help your gran is to stay calm. When we get to the hospital, we'll take her into casualty so the doctor can look after her. Then she may need an operation, so she'll be in for a while. Ivy grimaced. She knew only one other occasion when Grandma Sylvie had stayed overnight in hospital. Everyone knew about that. But it had happened before Ivy's parents were even born. Do you know what's wrong? She asked. The paramedic frowned. I think she may have broken her hip and possibly her wrist as well, but we won't know until we see an x-ray. While she scribbled down some notes, Ivy stroked Grandma Sylvie's hand and wondered if she'd suffered broken bones like that time as well. Probably. She'd had a car accident during a freak snowstorm, so had been unconscious for days. When she woke up, she couldn't remember what had happened during the accident or anything before it. The police only knew her name because she was wearing a necklace with Sylvie engraved on it. Retrograde amnesia, Ivy's mum called it. Ivy knew the exact date of the crash because the family discussed it so often. 5th January, 1969, 12th night. Before we get to the hospital, the paramedic said, I need to confirm what happened. He checked his watch. I make it 8:30 a.m. So the fall must have happened at about 7:45. And you said that your gran slipped in the kitchen while you were both in the other room. Ivy imagined Grandma Sylvie losing her balance and tumbling backwards onto her back legs in the air like an upturned beetle. If only she'd been there to help. Seb swallowed. She was baking mince pies. We heard her shouting. Over our shouting, Ivy remembered. She shot her brother a look of regret. They'd been arguing about a stupid new Rips poster that he'd got for Christmas. Ivy had accidentally knocked over an orange juice on it. If he hadn't been ranting at her, they might have got to Grandma Sylvie sooner. The paramedic flipped his paper round. Okay, that'll do. Are you able to get hold of your mum and dad? Ivy sighed. If only. More than anything, she wished her parents were there now. I've texted them, but there's been no reply, Seb said. I'll try calling when I get to the hospital. Mum's working, but we might catch her before she starts her shift. Ivy had said goodbye to her mum yesterday morning. If she was there now, she would have clapped her hands together and taken charge of the whole mess in an instant. Ivy and Seb had done nothing except ring the ambulance. Our dad's in Paris, Ivy added in a quiet voice. He's working too. Their dad was a consultant for the famous Victoria and Albert Museum in London, which meant that he was an expert in everything old, and people from around the world were always asking for his advice. The paramedic raised his eyebrows. So, that's why you were staying with your gran. Mum and Dad were with us over Christmas, Ivy explained, feeling the need to defend them. They just had to go back to work early. It had never really bothered her, them staying in London and leaving her and Seb 6 hours away in Bletchley Scrub with their grandma. But then this kind of emergency had never happened at the same time before. The paramedic put down his clipboard and turned to Grandma Sylvie, who, despite the neck brace, had made an effort to smile. Ivy doubted she could even hear what was being said with that thing on. She hadn't corrected the paramedic about Seb's age. Okay then, Mrs. Sparrow, I'm just going to check you now and see how you're doing. He untucked Grandma Sylvie's blanket and rolled it away until her arm was exposed. There was a thin cloth cotton sling around it, secured behind her neck. Delicately, he loosened the knot and slid the material out from beneath her. Grandma Sylvie winced. As the sling was taken away, Ivy caught her breath. Her grandma's entire arm was purple and bloated like a giant aubergine. The paramedic took the damaged wrist carefully between his fingers. Looks like the swelling's getting worse. It must be sore. He studied it from every angle. Ivy caught a flash of gold in her grandma's skin. I don't see the clasp on your bracelet. I think we might have to cut it off to make you feel more comfortable. Mrs. Sparrow, is that okay? Ivy's chest tightened. She imagined Grandma Sylvie's was probably doing the same. That solid gold bangle was one of the few items that remained of Grandma's life before her amnesia. She had been wearing it all the time of the accident, and Ivy couldn't remember her ever taking it off. The bracelet was special to her. Everyone knew that. Grandma Sylvie squeezed her eyes closed, and Ivy heard a rasping, "Do it!" The paramedic found a pair of silver pliers. Ivy shivered as two soft snicks pierced the air, and the two halves of the bangle fell away. "Ivy, my bag!" Grandma Sylvie lifted her hand, her other hand pointing shakily. Ivy reached down from the handbag and held it open. Very carefully, the paramedic placed both pieces of the bangle inside. "Will you look after it for me?" Grandma Sylvie asked. Ivy nodded, forcing a smile, and opened the bag to check that the bracelet was safely inside in the pocket. "Be careful," the paramedic warned. The ends are sharp. Ivy made sure not to touch it as she zipped up the pocket. "Here," Seb grunted, picking something up from the floor. "You just dropped this." He handed Ivy a black and white photo, the size of a postcard. Ivy had seen it many times before because Grandma Sylvie always kept it in her handbag. It was the only photo of her from before. The police had found it in the glove box of her car after the crash. "Weird," Seb said, raising his eyebrows. "I haven't seen that in a long while. Since I was little." We used to look at it all the time, Ivy thought, but she didn't say anything. Grandma still doesn't know who the other woman is, does she? Ivy shook her head. The photo showed a woman standing beside Grandma Sylvie. She was slight, with sharp dark eyes and unruly hair poking out from under a round black hat. She wore a thick tartan dress and studded cowboy boots. Grandma Sylvie was dressed in washed denim dungarees with what looked like satin ballet shoes on her feet. "What are they wearing?" Seb asked. It's like really bad fancy dress." Ivy shrugged. Who's to say it wasn't the fashion? She didn't really think it could have been. She just didn't want to agree with her brother. "Keep that safe," croaked a voice. Ivy turned. Grandma Sylvie was waving her good arm in their direction. Sorry? Ivy hastily tucked the photo back into her handbag and fastened it up. Seb slid away from her before she had to push him. That's chapter 1 over with. So, Grandma seems to have a very mysterious past. So what do you think about Grandma's past? Have a think. Maybe we'll find out a little bit more in chapter 2 tomorrow. Bye everyone.